All right, I just tried out the color contrast technique. Let's wrap things up and try a different technique. So the first thing I want to do is let's duplicate our text layer. Use the keyboard shortcut, well, first select the text layer, and then keyboard shortcut Control J, copy via layer. Let's throw that copy into our color contrast folder. Make sure that it's on top. If it was on bottom, below some of these things, might create some problems. And we'll collapse our color contrast folder group, and we're just going to hide it. So that allows us to have an example. Later, when we're working with the client, we can just click on this and say, hey, what do you think of this versus option B? Okay, so we're going to grab our text layer, and actually for this version, I'm going to want to put it right up here for me in my darker area because I'm going to do some value contrast this time. So in fact, let's start a new group. If you use the new group button, you need to also double click on this and call it, let's call it value contrast. Because that's the next thing I want to play around with is my value contrast. I'm going to throw my text up above here. Great. Okay, now with our value contrast group selected, we're going to add another adjustment layer so that we're non-destructive. I wanted to show you a couple different techniques for doing this. The first one is just going to be brightness and contrast. So I'm going to grab a brightness and contrast adjustment layer, and I'm going to come over here to my properties, and I'm going to simply bring the brightness down and maybe the contrast up a little bit. All right. So definitely increased the contrast between the title and the background, and you can just kind of play around with how much you want to create that contrast. So that's one technique. If you feel like this went a little bit too far, the cool thing about an adjustment layer, I'm going to go ahead and select my adjustment layer here. So I can come here to my opacity and just adjust the opacity of the adjustment layer. So I'm going to bring that back. Or because it has a layer mask, you can adjust certain areas. So for example, let's say I want the area behind the text to be dark, but I still want the flowers here in front to be its normal brightness. I can come over here to the gradient tool. You might not see the gradient tool if the paint bucket's in front. So if you see a paint bucket on your toolbar, just click and hold on the paint bucket. You'll get to the gradient tool. Come up here to your options bar. Select the black and white gradient. So there's these different options. So select the black and white, hit OK. Make sure that your mask is selected, and then come up here and click and drag. And sometimes I'll click and drag one direction and go, oops, that's not what I wanted. And then I'll just come back and click and drag the other direction. The farther you drag, the more subtle the change is. If you do a real short drag, it's going to be real dramatic. That looks pretty bad. So you definitely want to have, kind of a nice gradual change. And that looks a lot more natural. So this is one way to do it, and that's brightness and contrast. I'm going to go ahead and hide this because I wanted to show you another technique. Sometimes, so for my design, it kind of looks good because I've got this natural horizon line here. Actually, a couple different horizon lines. One that's horizontal right here and one that's diagonal right there. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that.